Welcome to the Infinite Wealth Podcast. I'm Cameron Christensen, along with our co-host Anthony Faso. We just wrapped up our interview with Tim Boyle, and to be honest, guys, it was kind of twofold.
Yeah.
Right? Man, this guy's got tremendous passion about infinite banking concept, but also we're introducing him to our listeners as Tim is one of our new coaches. He's got tremendous insight on infinite banking. He's got a great story and experience professionally, and so we're excited to have him aboard. So if you guys are out there and you're listening to this podcast and you like his story, you want to talk to Tim, feel free to reach out to him. His links are in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anthony, what's a takeaway you had from today's episode?
Well, I'll tell you one takeaway that I got was originally, I've seen Tim multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen him without a hat on, and it was nice to see him get all dressed up for our podcast. So we had razzed him a little bit before we hit record, but there was a lot of things I learned about Tim, as you'd mentioned his passion, and it was always interesting to hear people's story of how they came across infinite banking and how they're using it. But a couple things that stood out when he talked about his book, that he's got a passion for teaching the younger generation about money and finance. And for him to take the time to write 2 books is pretty cool. And I'm really big on teaching that next generation, because again, if we want to teach them about money, if you're doing infinite banking correctly, should be leaving a lot of death benefit to those kids. We got to make sure that they understand it. And part of that is at a young age, teaching them with books similar to what Tim has. And another thing I thought was interesting, when he talked about when he had worked for a large mutual insurance company, and when he wanted to start designing a policy like infinite banking, it had to go through their compliance department, when normally the compliance is there to make sure you're not doing anything illegal or you could get in trouble with your license. But this is something more where they are protecting their design and how they are having their agents design their policies, which is just another example on the importance of working with a good agent that's working with mutual companies that are open to infinite banking. Cam, what was 1 or 2 of your takeaways?
Yeah, I've got 2 big takeaways. One, man, is I love this, how his story kind of comes full circle, right? Is he opened up with telling us that he was instilled this curiosity about personal finance and education from a young age from his dad and grandpa. And now fast forward to where he is today, he's writing these books and kind of geared towards educating kids on personal finance. Man, I thought that was awesome. And then secondarily is if you look at kind of his history as far as kind of being in a traditional advisor role and then kind of coming over to the infinite banking side, if you will, man, I can't tell you how often I've seen that over the last 15 years that us have kind of been in this industry. Is, man, we used to go to some of these IBC events and it was really just whole bunch of IBC guys, and there wasn't any traditional guys there. And now over the years, you start to see more and more traditional advisors starting to embrace and starting to get intrigued by IBC. And so his story is a great example of just that. So guys, we're excited to be bringing Tim on. I think he's going to be a tremendous asset for Infinite Wealth and for you guys, right? A great resource on somebody that's passionate about infinite banking, somebody that knows what they're doing. And so we're excited to be bringing him on. But today's interview was with Tim Boyle. All right. He attended University of New Hampshire for undergrad and also graduate. He's a former financial advisor, has an interest in personal finance, investing, and economics. And his series, The Richest Boy, was an idea decades in the making and was finally brought to life in the fall of 2021. The series is intended to help children learn basic financial principles in a fun and engaging way that they can take with them throughout their lives. Hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Take care.
If you're an investor or want to be an investor and you're looking to create passive income that exceeds your monthly expenses, then this is the podcast for you. Here on the Infinite Wealth Podcast, we combine the philosophies of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad along with Nelson Nash's infinite banking concept. Hey guys, I got to tell you, we are excited today. The title of this podcast is going to be How to Raise Financially Intelligent Children. But really, that is a disguise for us being able to introduce Tim Boyle to you guys. So we are excited to have him. Tim's been working with us for a little bit, and so now we are introducing him to our listeners.
Well, speaking of a disguise, he just mentioned that multiple people have mistaken him for Clark Kent. Right? I mean, so that's a great disguise.
He looks good. He looks good.
I mean, he said Superman, but with the collared shirt, it's Clark Kent. I mean, no glasses, but you are looking sharp.
I appreciate it. I should have worn the spandex shirt today, but
Yeah, make it tight.
Tim, man, you've got a great story. Very interesting. I'm excited to share it with our listeners. And man, let's dive in. What do you think?
Sure. Sounds good.
Awesome. Tim, I know you've had an interest in personal finance, investing, and economics from a pretty early age, is what I've gathered from our conversations. What kind of drove that curiosity for you?
I think it was mostly due to having a father and grandfather who were who talked about those sorts of things all the time. So while they were focused more on, say, investing in the stock market and things like that, from a very early age, I got into that sort of thing. I was looking at the Wall Street Journal, pretending I was investing in stocks, had my own little like fake stock portfolio on the side. So I've been doing that since, I don't know, probably junior high or so. So that's kind of where the interest started. And then I would say in college, I went to school for political science and history, but I ended up getting really interested in economics and dove deep into particularly the Austrian school of economics in college. So this was over 20 years ago, I guess. So that kind of really got me interested, so that when I got out of grad school, instead of going to become a lawyer or a professor, I ended up joining one of the big mutual companies and got my insurance license, my investment licenses, and that's kind of how I got into the insurance side of things. So my interest started at an early age, and then I was with the mutual company for a couple of years, learned all about like the basics of insurance and investing and all that sort of thing. Shockingly, though, they didn't teach us about IBC, which was yeah, I know, very strange.
What? Yeah,
very strange. So back then, I did not learn about IBC while I was there, but in playing with their software, I started to kind of experiment a little bit with seeing how well these could perform and how the cash could grow inside these policies. So while my first policies were 100% base premium, not properly designed policies, those, for some of my clients, at least, I started to learn how to use the software and make these things much better for as far as the cash value side of things. So I was able to get at least some of my clients into they were not perfectly designed IBC policies or anything like that, but that was kind of my first experience into that, and like how you could use a properly designed, or maybe even an improperly designed policy for future income streams, or saving conservative part of your portfolio, something like that. That's kind of how I viewed it back then, particularly for young families who I was mostly working with, and the ways to save for college, education, things like that. So that was kind of how I was introduced unofficially to it. And then fast forward, I ended up moving to Florida, getting out of my practice, and then probably around 7 or 8 years ago, I still to this day don't know how I got introduced to becoming your own banker and IBC. It could have been just like you go on YouTube and you like end up somehow like hours later you're stumbling on stuff you never thought you were gonna you never intended to. So somehow I ended up getting the book and reading it, and that's when I was like, are you kidding me? How come I didn't know all this? How come the insurance company I worked with before didn't teach me about this? And So then I just started reading everything I possibly could about IBC and how you can use these policies. And so that was Becoming Your Own Banker. It was like people like Bob Murphy, who I was already a huge Bob Murphy fan. I don't know if anybody knows him, but he's probably my favorite living Austrian economist. And so that I started reading all of that, and so this is probably, I would say, somewhere between 7-8 years ago. And then because I still worked with my advisor was still with that company, so I then could go to them and be like, hey, I want to design these like this. And so that's when I started to, although I think this is kind of funny, I think I mentioned this to you before, Cam, but even after I read Becoming Your Own Banker and all these other books on IBC, the next policy I designed was a 15-pay 100% base premium policy. So even despite reading,
well, Tim, I would say don't beat yourself up too much, because that makes 2 out of the 3 of us standing here that have made that same mistake. So I won't point any fingers at who the other one is, where their first policy was all base. I mean, that would be really embarrassing, but we're going to move on. We're going to move on to policy design. So you had the first one that was all base, 15-pay.
This was like my 4th policy at this point. So, and they were all.
Tim, I'm curious, how come you didn't design it like Infinite Banking?
Because while I read all of this, I still didn't fully like understand it, I guess. I still don't fully understand what I was thinking, because knowing what I know now, I don't know how I could design something like that.
Make such an embarrassing mistake, right?
It's incredibly embarrassing. So
I wouldn't know.
Well, okay, I got to clarify. Okay, my first policy was an all-base policy, which we typically call, I call it a your mama's policy. There's more of the traditional whole life, but I didn't know what I was doing, and then once I realized it, I was upset. But fortunately, we went to the insurance company. Was like, hey. I'm
a moron.
Well, first of all, kind of my mentor should have overseen. Why would you let a brand new agent design a policy without reviewing it?
I know. But, I should have caught that, man. I should have got that. So
good opportunity. I opened that door for you.
That's on me. Yep.
But this has a happy ending. We went back to the insurance company and explained the mistake, and they went and reissued the policy the proper way. And that just shows the advantages of working with a mutual insurance company. Remember, they're on our team, and that they do want to help us.
Yep. And speaking of team, right? This episode's not about you, Anthony.
No, you're calling me out. Tim, I let it slide the first time. But, Tim, I'm curious, how was it perceived? You went to this where they're typically doing, the traditional or your mama's policies, and then you come here, hey, let's move some of that from base. Let's move it to PUAs. How was that originally perceived?
You saying with my future policies that I?
Yeah. When you went to your advisors, like, hey, I know I want to move. I want to change the premiums a little bit.
Sure.
What was their initial reaction?
It's going to be a lot of compliance notes. There's going to be a lot of notes so that that the home office didn't have any issues with it. So there's lots of that's what I've been told.
That is interesting. As far as compliance, there's nothing with the agencies that we're not doing correctly, but it's internally, they want to make sure that you're increasing that base premium.
And again, I don't know I don't specifically understand why that was the case. But
let me tell you.
I was told, so yeah.
The biggest deal is that they make money off the base premium, and the way we design it, even though it's the best thing for the client, it's not the best thing for the agent. And we're typically taking a huge pay cut. So that would obviously be a concern if you're designing same premium but getting, 25 to 30% of the commission, that would create some concerns, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, I just want to go back, sorry, briefly to point out something that you were smarter than me. I still have 4 100% base premium policies. So
how long have you had them?
What, 15 years, 2 of them, and then
You should keep those.
They're probably great. Yeah.
One of them finally went positive, so that was great. Took 15 years, and the other ones are still catching up. So but I think part of the reason I didn't was just because while they are vanilla and they are your traditionally designed policy, I'm still happy that I have them. I still have used that cash value many times over. I probably could have or should have 1035 exchanged them earlier at some point. But I'm still happy that I have them. They're still in force. I still pay that 100% base premium. But yeah, early on, I wish I had done a 1035 exchange.
And you know what? And we did a podcast on, I think it was called, "Is a Base Premium Bad?" Because a lot of the IBC people are bad mouthing how terrible a base premium is, but there's a lot of advantages to it. And when you the farther out you go, I mean, they are going to get close. So, I mean, it's not terrible. I mean, it serves its purpose, and right. you still got a good policy with a good mutual company. Even though they don't support infinite banking, that is still a valid policy. Right.
So it's a good policy, but it's not a great policy. So then after that 15 pay that I put into place, then everyone since then has now been a properly designed policy, which obviously performed better. But yeah, so even somebody who had read many books, watched hours and hours of YouTube videos and everything I could possibly find, I still didn't know what I was doing.
So, that's a prime example. When we learn something, we tend to get stuck in that school of thought. And even though when we get more new information, it's still hard to deviate from the original path. So it's very common that we might need to hear things multiple times and get a better understanding of it.
Right. Yeah. And so obviously then I started to fully understand it. I started to be able to sit down with my former managing director and design my policy, like sitting there with the software. And then, so where kind of things evolved over the last 7 years or so is, so obviously I've done all this research. I actually knew how to design these policies. And so I started helping other friends of mine. One, I started telling everybody I possibly could about IBC. So, and a couple of my friends and former clients actually really started to get into it just like I did. So I was telling everyone to read Becoming Your Own Banker. I was sending links to YouTube videos and just trying to tell people how amazing this is. So then over time, people were coming to me hey, I'm looking to start one of these, and here's the policy that my advisor put together. And they started what do you think of it? And so then I started over the years is working with people and their advisors to make sure it was designed in a proper way. And so I did that for dozens of people probably over the last 5 years or so. And then I had some of my former clients and others be hey, I'd rather just work with you directly. So can we do that? And I was oh, yeah, we can do that. And so that's when I reached out to you guys. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got here in a very kind of a brief summary. But yeah.
Man, and Tim, I'll be honest, man, for the listeners out there, we get calls often about people calling in and, hey, can we work together? Can we work for you? How would that look? And man, when you called in, right, I was really impressed. One, by your background, but also two, just kind of your passion about it, right? And so you'd mentioned there that you were sharing it with kind of your close network, But one thing that stood out to me is you were like presenting, right? You were like going to events and like renting booths and talking to people about this with having no skin in the game, man. You're just out there trying to share this message. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess because it's worked so well for me early on, and just to kind of go back a little bit, I was when I first started it, the way I was thinking I was going to use it was first to pay for my taxes, right? And then I own a business, a sales business. So once it kind of like grew the cash value big enough where I could like pay my end of year taxes sort of thing, then I started using it for cash flow purposes in my business, which I still do to this day. And then so then as the cash value is growing, now I have some available capital for opportunities. So I was using it to buy short-term rentals. I was using it to pay for my book that I self-published, land investing, an Amazon business that I started. So I had been using it now for a while, and so I was just like, everybody needs to know about this. So because this is amazing, and I just felt like if I could help family and friends position themselves better, that would be great for them. And yeah, I don't know why I understand why I'm so passionate, why I feel like I need to go and tell everyone about it. That I don't know. There's something subconscious in me. But shockingly though, a lot of people weren't as excited as me to talk about life insurance. So that's
weird.
That was strange. I don't know. I thought life insurance is one of the most exciting topics to talk about, but that is not the case for a lot of people.
No.
Awesome, man. You touched on a few things there, some of the ways that you've used it. I don't know if you want to highlight one or two, just kind of high level of some of the opportunities that you've acted on over the years using your policy.
Yeah. So, like I said, obviously the boring stuff has helped pay for taxes, help my cash flow. So obviously as a business owner, I'm sure there's lots of other business owners out there that you might have some months where things are down and some months where things are up. And so being able to loan my business, make loans from my policies to my businesses helps me manage all my cash flows. So that is incredibly handy. And then, so it's helped me purchase a farm in Maine that me and my partners do short-term rentals with, large group rentals. That's pretty exciting, which we then leveraged to buy a second short-term rental. And that's probably the most exciting, but funding my book. So shockingly, if you get a good artist, they're not cheap. So my policies have funded that, and then the cash flow from those book sales go right back into the policy. So those are just a few of the ways I've done it, but it's worked great. And if I hadn't done this, I don't know what I would have done with this capital. That's another thing that I think is overlooked, is the forced savings that building out this kind of infrastructure has allowed me to have opportunities that I otherwise never would have had. So
awesome, man. You mentioned your book a couple of times, and I haven't touched on it yet. I'm kind of pushing that off, but I will make sure that we touch on it. One of the things you mentioned in there is you're kind of in a group, right? You're in kind of an investors group, and that's one of the instructions that Nelson has for us in his book, right? At the end of his book, he talks about getting in community with others and kind of sharing those ideas. Tim, how long you've been in that group, right? What benefit have you seen coming from that? Can you share that aspect with our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So actually my one of my friends and clients who I think you've had on the podcast coming up here, we started, or technically it was his idea, but we started this maybe a year ago now. So we get together at least once a month, various individuals. It could be people who are business owners, real estate investors, or other people in all sorts of different industries. And we get together at least once a month, and we talk about everything. So it could be anything from just the general economy, like where we think things are going, what do we think about interest rates, etc. Or it could be somebody has an issue with their business or an investment that they're considering. And so we're able as a group to kind of to discuss these things and use everyone as a sounding board. And then plus multiple people in the groups have done different deals together at this point. Now we're talking about like pooling funds together to go after other deals. So it's been it's just fun. It's great to get together with a group of people and talk about these things. And everyone is different. So you get lots of great ideas. You get lots of interesting conversation. So worst case scenario, that's all you get, and that's still to me worth doing. But then you hear about opportunities you otherwise wouldn't have heard about. You hear about ideas that you hadn't considered. If people can do this, again, it's an unofficial group that we put together. But if you have a group like that, I'd say start it if you haven't.
Awesome, man. Thanks for sharing. Let's dive into your books.
Yeah.
Where did the passion for writing and the passion for kind of directing some of this education towards kids come from?
So honestly, it's when I was a financial advisor at a grad school, I had this idea had popped in my head, and I was like, there's really not a lot out there that teaches kids these basic ideas, right? So we don't learn about them in school. It's rarely. In fact, most people, you're not supposed to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So most children and adults are never taught about this. Their parents don't talk about money. They don't talk about finances. They don't talk about any of it. And so I had the idea a long time ago that I'd love to start a book series that taught children these basic ideas that they don't learn in school. And so I've had the idea for a long time, but then it wasn't until 2020 and all the government lockdowns and my business was basically shuttered. So I was like, well, now I got some time. So might as well be productive. And so that's when I wrote the first book. So that came out 2 years ago, maybe. And so it's a trilogy. So that was the first book. So the first book, it's extremely loosely based on the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And so my title is The Richest Boy in Athens. And so it takes place in ancient Athens, and you follow this boy Cap, which most people don't realize this, but it's short for capitalist. But you follow Cap as he's learning these important lessons, right? So like in book one, you're going to learn about work ethic, you're going to learn about goal setting, and you're going to learn about paying yourself first. And those are that's what you'll get in the first book through an interesting and fun story that I think most kids can relate to and find entertaining. And then book two just follows up from there, and now you're going to start to learn about risk, and you're going to start to learn about compound interest, and putting your money to work and starting to invest, right? So those are the first two books. And then the third book, which is now, that'll be about entrepreneurship, starting a business, and kind of delve more into investing, and all in a fun way that kids they know they're learning, but hopefully they are enjoying it. So.
Man, I love how this kind of story, right? Your story has kind of come full circle, right? You were instilled this curiosity in personal finance and education from your dad and grandfather, and now you're writing books that are targeted towards kids to give them that same thing, man. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, where can they go, right? If somebody's listened and they have some young kids, what age ranges is this geared towards, and where can they go to get those books?
Sure. So it's geared towards, I'd say, 6 to 12-year-olds. I've had some kids older than that read it and still took a lot out of it. Mostly probably because they didn't learn any of this. So it can go a little bit older than that. But yeah, 6 to 12-year-olds. And you can get it. You can buy the physical book off my website, which is therichestboy.com. You can get the Kindle versions on Amazon as well. And I do want to point out that I think another way that you can use IBC, which I'm using for my daughter, you guys use for your kids, but I think it's an underrated tool, is using IBC for your children and what that can do for them down the road. I think is probably underutilized and underappreciated, what that can do for their financial future. And honestly, IBC it's almost like exactly what I'm teaching in these books, is kind of thinking long-term, low time preference, compounding, and benefiting from that with more personal freedom, more financial freedom down the road.
Awesome, man.
Tim, remind me, how old are your kids?
She is about to turn 1. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Next week.
Okay. So what are you envisioning for her with her policy?
Sure. So she actually has 2 policies right now. So the first policy I took out, my idea was that would be kind of her, if she goes to college, and we can get into the debate whether I want her necessarily to go to college or not, but when she turns 18, she'll be given the option of taking this policy and using it either to pay for college, or hopefully, ideally, maybe start a business, or purchase some sort of cash flowing asset. So my idea with the first policy is I can help her, set her up at 18 again with either a business or a college education. And then the second policy is, and hopefully she never listens to this podcast, but that one I plan on giving it to her as a wedding gift, as a way to either pay for her house or something like that. And then I'll take out probably a third policy on her soon, and that'll be for other purposes down the road. But that's kind of like how I see myself and her eventually using it, and I'll do that with future kids as well.
Tim, I got a question for you, right? I know from my experience, when I got introduced to infinite banking, I was super excited about it. Took it to my wife, and right, she's like, "What are you talking about?" Right? How has the education or conversation on infinite banking gone with your wife over the years?
So I'd say, given how often I talk about it, I think mostly her eyes will glaze over at this point. But so it's funny, as much as she doesn't necessarily love talking about it, I think she probably knows more about IBC than 99.9% of the population. And she understands it and appreciates it. And, but yeah, so she is probably bored about hearing it from me, for being completely honest.
Awesome, man. Is anything else that you'd like to kind of share with our listeners, just as an introduction? Anything else that comes to mind, Tim?
For anyone else up here in New Hampshire, so I'm in New Hampshire. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with like the Free State Project or anything like that, but if anybody's listening to this, just know I'm supporting you guys here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So
awesome, man. Tim, in the show notes of this episode we're definitely going to have kind of the link to your website where they can go out there and get the book. But also, man, you're taking appointments now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we're going to have his Calendly link that'll be on there, right? If you guys are listening to this and you guys want to speak with Tim, go to the website or go to this link, book some time to have a conversation with him. If you guys want to learn a little bit more about how he's implementing it or how he can help you with infinite banking.
Tim, thanks for being on. It's good to meet Superman. You can be able to see him, even though I guess Superman isn't that tech savvy, is something that we did learn, which is why we were a little late on the live.
Because it's Clark Kent, right? I mean, if he was his Superman uniform, would have been great.
I could have figured it out, but
yeah.
It'd be sweet if you just ripped that open and had a Superman or IBC, or maybe a passive income monthly expenses. But Tim, thanks for being on. We're excited for you to be not only a part of the team, but also you're providing education for others with these books. And it's so important that we teach these kids these principles, because if you're incorporating infinite banking, you're going to end up leaving a lot more death benefit to those children than we ever imagined. And if we don't teach them how to handle a little, they're not going to be able to handle a lot. So go get Tim's books.
Awesome.
And then go make it a fantastic day.
Nice, Tim. Tim, appreciate you being on the show, man. We're super excited. I'm going to say one last thing is that I don't think I've passed this along to you, but here, as we've kind of gotten to know each other, I've spoken with a couple of people in your network, man, and they've had just phenomenal things to say about you. You said that you're a stand-up guy, and I think they were saying that you were like one of their groomsmen, right? So I will say that Anthony and I try to protect our culture here at Infinite Wealth pretty well, right? We keep everybody at arm's distance, but man, we're excited to bring you on board. So I can't wait for next year.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
And like we normally close it, and then is with go make it a fantastic day.
Take care.
If you like this video, I know you're like this one. And if you want to learn how investors use infinite banking to increase their returns and lower their taxes, check this out. And if you have some questions and want to see if infinite banking is for you, hop on a discovery call with us. Link for that will be in the description.